When it comes to my personal growth, there are many things. There have been many things that have really stood out for me. But one main thing I would say is I've been humbled. I've been humbled by the fact that I have known how less I know. I know very little things. You think about all these lecturers and what they give us, how they challenge us, you really see that you need to know more and more. But secondly, the sacrifices of the people around, the lecturers, the administration, it leaves you humble to say, if I were them, would I really do the same?
My name is Christopher Wiles. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Bristol in England, southwest England for those of you who care. And I'm doing a PhD in philosophy. I'm currently at the African Christian University on a placement. In Zambia, you guys call it an attachment, so I hope that makes sense. I was born in Johannesburg originally, and my family immigrated to the UK, Edinburgh, in Scotland when I was 4 years old, and then we moved to England when I was 10 years old, near Liverpool. I don't support football, but if I have to choose a team, it would be Liverpool. It's a hard question to answer because I don't really know what my home country is. So if we're talking about South Africa, then I just love the culture in Southern Africa generally, how welcoming people are and the joy that is generally felt in a Southern African context. But if we're talking about Scotland and England, which is not quite I don't know if I'd describe it as my home country, but I would say a fun fact is that Scotland feels more animosity towards England, whereas England just has, they're just blissfully unaware and think that everyone is friends. That is, I guess those are some facts. Haggis is great. If you don't know what haggis is, don't ask what it is, just give it a try. And it's a nice national dish from Scotland. You can enjoy that. So in primary school, I studied what was required of me. However, as I went to university, I did natural sciences, in the end specializing in neuroscience, and then I went on to do a master's in philosophy of biological and cognitive sciences. And I don't like the name of that title for the master's because it makes it sound like it's not a real degree. But it's essentially a master's in philosophy of biology and psychology, and now I'm currently doing a PhD in philosophy, but that PhD is still the same subject of philosophy of biology. I loved art growing up, which seems very disjointed from what I've just said. My mum's mum was an excellent artist, and so I'm very visual in my thinking, but then I realized art won't make money and biology is the most visual science, and so I decided to go down the biology route, albeit last minute. I just realized very late in that I actually enjoy biology, and the thing that fixed my attention in biology was how beautiful it was. And it seemed to have this unique beauty that sets it apart from physics and chemistry. And so I would spend hours, well not hours, but over the years at least, I've spent hours looking at videos of the inner workings of the cell and just trying to think what makes biology beautiful. And ultimately that turns out to be a philosophical question, which is why I don't work in a lab and instead I've gone down the philosophy of biology route. Basically, I sit in an armchair and write about biology. So what drew me to lecture at ACU was the Lord. He did that. I was listening to a sermon in, I think it was 2020, I don't think it was as early as 2018. But it was a sermon by Dr. Bakam, who's one of the faculty here, teaches theology. And he was explaining that there was this university in southern Africa, and that already pricked my ears, because he's an American preacher, so I'm like, why is this guy talking about Southern Africa? But then he said this university, if you're a lecturer there, you take what you've learned at a secular institution, and you have to keep the standard of what you were taught at that institution, but you need to integrate a biblical perspective into every aspect of what you teach at this university. So you take your learning from your secular institution, but you integrate a biblical perspective into your expertise. And that really captured me because I already love intersecting disciplines. So I do philosophy, I do biology, and as a Christian, I became a Christian in 2016, but I love theology, and I always think about how these three things fit together, but I've not had an outlet for exploring that kind of passion. And so I was like, this sounds like a great university. However, that was a pipe dream because I had no opportunity to come here. Fast forward to 2023, I managed by God's grace to get funding for my PhD, and there was a weekend that the funding body had where they said, if you're not thinking of doing a placement, think again. We will pay for the flights, we'll pay for the accommodation, we'll pay for all the things that you need to do a placement. And so I again remembered this university somewhere in Zambia exists, and so I asked my funding body, can I do a placement with this institution? And by God's grace, here I am. My experience lecturing at the ACU is like, that's the first time I've lectured anywhere, and so I've grown in very almost obvious ways, in the sense of like, I now know how to teach better, I now know how to lecture better, and hopefully know how to engage students better. So from a professional perspective, it's really helped me. The style of lecturing at the ACU is really, it's been unique for me because I was told by Dr. Ben Killian not to deliver lectures in the form of a monologue from the front, but to use a kind of Socratic method, which, I mean, people use that term really loosely, but what it really amounts to is asking lots of questions of the students and having more of a dialogue with them. And I've really enjoyed that from a selfish perspective, because it means I don't have to write as much when preparing the material, because I can just let the students fill in the time. But also it's something that I felt more equipped to do because I've led Bible studies at my church, and so leading group discussions is something I'm more used to. And yeah, lecturing has been a really interesting mix of delivering information. I have to give new information. I can't just let the students guide the whole thing, because otherwise it'll be much harder for them to learn important facts. But also at the same time consistently engaging students. So I really appreciate that dynamic approach, and it's not something that I was exposed to too much at my own university. So the question says, what sets the ACU apart from other universities where I've lectured? As said in the previous answer, this is the first time I've lectured at a university. However, what I would say is what sets it apart is certainly the biblical focus. You are encouraged to apply the Bible deeply. Being from European universities, that has never been an opportunity for me, and so that's one obvious way in which it is set apart. However, there are other things that set the ACU apart in terms of the method of teaching, which I said in my previous answer relies more on dialogue, and for me, I made it rely more on group discussion, whereas again, lectures at other universities have very much been monologues from the front for about an hour or two, and so that has been helpful. Another thing that sets the ACU apart, we at least aspire to this ideal. I like how I'm saying we now, even though I'm only here for 3 months, but nevertheless, we at the ACU aspire to the ideal of mentoring students. So we see education as a holistic enterprise. It should develop, because we're a Christian university, it should develop your spiritual growth, your academic growth, but also your personal growth. And so I've seen other faculty here, they will regularly walk alongside the students and see how they're doing academically in their work, and even pray with them and have lunch with them, and try to make sure that the students know that they're being looked out for in terms of a kind of mentor style dynamic rather than just being a detached lecturer. So those are a few of the things that I think set the ACU apart insofar as your experience as a lecturer might differ here compared to other universities. They have done it's really hard to even bring to mind just how many things have been done to welcome and support me here. The first thing would be Dr. Ben Killian, who's currently the Vice-Chancellor. Sadly, he's leaving at the end of this month, but his family was so welcoming to me. I came to Zambia, and for context, for those of you who aren't in Zambia, there's a big difficulty with load shedding, which amounts to having about 20 or so hours of no power a day. As you can imagine, me coming from the UK, that was quite a shock. However, Dr. Killian got me bread, he got me, what was it, like some oat-based cereal, he got me milk, he got me eggs, he got me spreads for those breads, he got me toiletries, and in Zambia it's always good to carry a bottle of water with you, because the tap water I have discovered is not good for me. And so he got me all of that as well. And his family have had an open door policy for me to invade their house at any time, to the point that as a British person it almost made me uncomfortable, because you have to be invited before you go to someone's house. But they were so welcoming that they would just let me basically walk in. There were times when that did happen. So that's one way. To be brief on the other ways, Mrs. Kabwe has helped with the rent and has borne a lot of the administrative burden of me being here. And she's done that with immense grace. She found the accommodation I'm currently staying at. Mrs. Njovu has helped me get my study permit, which I have now got. And man, I was really stressed about this because I thought I was going to get kicked out of the country at one point. But she was always there to just be like, it's okay, Chris, you can be calm, everything's fine. And so now I have that study permit. I won't be here for more than a month, but it lets me stay here for 2 years. And even people like Dr. Wilson Tembo, Mr. or Doctor, I can't remember, I'll call him Doctor to be safe, was very considerate of me being a foreigner. So if someone was speaking Bembo or Nyanja in a meeting, he would take time to explain in English what someone was saying, and has also repeatedly tried to help me feel included in group discussions, and even the farewell to Dr. Killian as well. So yeah, a particular memorable experience. It's quite difficult when you're a lecturer, because week in, week out, I've been doing 9 hours of lecturing, and so it can all become a blur, which makes it hard to answer this question. I'd say the experience of lecturing has been a memorable experience, learning how to pace myself and that kind of thing. However, there are happy memories. They had the talent show, for example, where 2 of my students, Rotary and Faithfulness, which are excellent names, were presenting, and I think I was actually really struck by the hidden talents of my students. There was one student who was really quiet in my classes, and it doesn't mean that they're not paying attention, but it's just, you don't know if someone's engaging. And then at the talent show, she just like gives, she was the winning performance. She was in a group that won, and it was really incredible, and it really took me aback, and I had no input into that preparation for the talent show, but I think it was the first time I still felt like I'm really proud of these students. I can't take any credit, but I was still proud for some bizarre reason. So I think that was a really good memory. I enjoyed that evening. So a lot of this question is in the future tense. What are my goals as a lecturer for the ACU, and how do I see myself contributing in an ongoing sense? And the problem is that my placement here is coming to an end, and so I've finished lectures, we finished our assessments. If I'm being really literal, my goal is to give the final marks for student presentations. But if we're talking more broadly, my hope and one of my goals has been to give the students the best education I possibly can, the education that I wish I had as a student. I went to the University of Cambridge to learn history and philosophy of science, or at least my broader degree was natural sciences, but that was one of the modules. And I really struggled, like really struggled. And over the years, especially since becoming a Christian, I learned so many things that I wish my lecturers wouldn't have told me these things because they weren't Christians. But the things that I wish I had heard at that time, I've been able to communicate to my students so that they can wrestle with really big ideas from David Hume, Immanuel Kant, all of these skeptics, but have it from a biblical lens. And I've been surprised by how much the Bible speaks into a lot of Enlightenment philosophy. And so one of my goals has been helping the students wrestle with these huge ideas. I hope now that I've done the course, I will leave lecture material for future years that Dr. Isaac Madsen or whoever takes over the Foundations in Science course can pick up and similarly equip future students, hopefully even better than I have done, because there are many things I think that could have been improved that hopefully they can improve on going forwards. So I've been encouraged to give an honest answer, to be myself, so I'll say some positive things and I'll say some things that you should definitely consider, which depending on your circumstance may be negative, may not. The positive things I'll say is, if you're coming to the ACU as a lecturer, if your passion is to integrate the Bible into your discipline and you don't have the opportunity to do that where you currently are, this is the place to do that. If you have a passion for teaching, and especially a passion for, in Zambia, one of the goals of the ACU is to help students become more enterprising, to get a liberal arts education, that kind of thing. So if you have a passion for teaching that audience in particular, and teaching them from a biblical lens and from the lens of your discipline, then my advice would be go for it. Like, come to the ACU, bring your expertise, think deeply about how the Bible relates to it. And I've been very surprised as I've had to teach the Foundations in Science course just how much biblical relevance there has been. If anything, the best lectures I've had have been the ones where I've put most of the Bible in there, and where I've neglected to do that, those have been more of the dry and I think less fruitful lectures. So that would be my encouragement to you, is to really think about how the two relate between your discipline and the Bible. The second thing I would say is, for me personally, I'm a PhD researcher currently, and so I have a passion for independent research. And what I'd say is, if you're considering coming to the ACU, it might be more challenging for you to do research as opposed to simply teaching, simply for the fact that you'll need to have your own subscriptions for journals. Currently, the ACU do not provide journal subscriptions. Now, there is a way around that. If you have the opportunity, maybe you could be an adjunct professor at whatever institution you're currently at, or if you have an opportunity to be an adjunct professor at a university that has journal subscriptions, then that might help you, because then you'd have access to the material you would need for your research. Another challenge with being a researcher at the ACU is simply time. In this season, there have been many challenging things that require all hands on deck at the ACU, and that means that lecturers don't have as much time as they would like for independent research as well. That may change in the future, but those are just two things that are relevant if you're considering coming to the ACU as a researcher. But as a lecturer here, I've certainly had very, very positive experiences, and would encourage you, if you want to come on an adventure to Zambia and honestly get to know the culture as well, because personally I love it here. So that's an encouragement for you as well.